Hello, this video is for Stat 110, Module 2, Part 4, and includes a discussion of the WSU vitamin case study. Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. So the WSU vitamin case study is a study that was done here at Winona State University, and it's similar to the breastfed bottle-fed case study that we considered earlier in the course, in that it's a matched paired study. However, the individuals here were matched against themselves instead of another individual. So here's some data that we got from the WSU vitamin case study. You can download that data here at the link provided. This study was done by a couple of biology students, and they were interested in investigating the intake of calories and various vitamins by WSU college students. There were a total of 71 students that were recruited to participate in this study. 57 of those individuals were females and 14 were male. For each person who participated in this study, the food intake of all food was measured very carefully over several days. Then the researchers carefully evaluated the types and amount of food eaten, and from this they computed the average daily intake for energy, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. And that's the data that we see in the spreadsheet here. The energy actual column is how much energy they actually took in. The vitamin A actual column is how much vitamin A they actually took in. These other columns here, the energy DRI, for example, is the daily recommended intake for that particular person. So let's take a look at person number 1 here in our spreadsheet. There where my cursor, the actual energy intake or caloric intake was right at 2100 calories. The daily recommended intake for that individual was at 1750 calories. So this individual was just a little bit above their daily recommended intake. This person down here in row 6 was way under their daily recommended intake. They're supposed to be getting about 1750, but this person actually only took in 873. So this person was not getting enough calories for that over that time period of the study. We have that same type of information for vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and also iron. What I'm going to look at here in this handout or set of notes is the vitamin A intake. And what I'm curious, or what I'm going to be calculating, is whether or not they were over their daily recommended intake for vitamin A, or whether they were under their daily recommended intake for vitamin A. So I'm simply going to go through my spreadsheet, and I'm going to use this formula here that I've provided on the screen to determine whether or not I'm over or under in the amount. I certainly could do this line by line, but I have, I think, 70 some lines to go through. It's going to be easier to make a little spreadsheet function as I have here on the screen. And all this is doing is just checking if H2, which is this cell right here, if that's bigger than the cell next to it, I2. If it is bigger than the cell next to it, then I'm going to label that as over. If that's not the case, then it's going to be labeled as under. So let's just go ahead and check the function here. For person number 2, which would be line 3 in the spreadsheet, I have 1042 is how much they actually took in. They're supposed to be taking in about 700. All of these first individuals are females, and it looks like the daily recommended intake for vitamin A is 700 milligrams. So this person, the second person here, was over that 700. So that spreadsheet function just listed it as over. This one here was way under. 164 is what this person actually took in. They were supposed to take in 700, so they're under. I can type that formula here in this cell as I have it shown here, and then I can I can click on the lower right-hand corner and then just drag that down for the remaining cells. I'll show you more about how to use a spreadsheet in the next handout. So we're going to continue to use the spreadsheet more and more as we move forward in the class. We're going to rely less on the apps and more on spreadsheets. The important part about this handout is not using the spreadsheet, but just understanding that I have to do some work here before I can get the outcome for my study. Here I've been given the raw data, and I need to do a little bit of spreadsheet functions in order to figure out the number of over and under, and I'm going to do this for both males and females. Notice that the males are at the bottom of this spreadsheet. So down towards the bottom are I think I had 14 males in this study, and those are the individuals here at the bottom. You can see by the second column over is all listed as M's. Once I have the over and under identified, I'm just going to use the COUNTIF function to count how many are over and how many are under. So here I'm just doing a COUNTIF, and I want to count the number that are over. And I'm doing that for the females. And the females start in cell or row 2, and they look like they end in row 58. So if we go all the way down here to row 58, that's the last line of the females. So what the COUNTIF function is doing here is just counting up the number of overs I have for the females. And it looks like I have 25. How many overs did I have for the males? I only had 3 for the males. Notice that the cells here are J59 through J72. Again, that's where the males are located in my spreadsheet, down here below that horizontal line. And you can easily see that I only have 3 that are over in that group. Counting the males by hand would be pretty easy. I only have 3 there. Counting the females, there's a bunch of them, so it might be more convenient to use the COUNTIF function. Okay, so here's kind of a summary of what we've learned from that raw data. For the vitamin A for females, I had a total of 32 that were under and 25 that were over. I had a total of 57 females. And here's a schematic that I made in a spreadsheet just showing you the over and under here. The over would be the light gray and the under the dark gray. For the males, we can see that I had a considerable number that were under what they should have been taking in, and only 3 that were over what they should have been taking in. So that graph looks somewhat different. I'm talking about the share of light gray to dark gray on the male side compared to the female side. So let's consider our research questions here for this set of notes. So I want to know, is there enough statistical evidence to say that WSU females are off target from their daily recommended intake? And here I'm talking about vitamin A. I have that same research question for the males. So this analysis here, I'm going to do this in tandem. We're going to be looking at females, and we're also going to be looking at males. So let's consider what the reference distribution should look like. And we'll do the females first. So again, I had a total of 57 females. So my number line is going to go from 0 up to 57. The number of trials here is going to be 57, or the sample size is going to be 57. My study outcome here was 25. So I'm going to go ahead and list that as my study outcome, 25. My number line, as I just said, is going to go from 0 up to 57. Now, what we are going to do when we do our formal hypothesis test is compare our data against the 50% situation. And the 50% situation is going to be when they are on target. So if females are on target, then I would expect about half of them to be over and about half of them to be under. So this indeed is going to be a 50-50 scenario. Again, this is much like the breastfed bottle fed example that we considered earlier. That was a 50-50 scenario as well. So if there's no difference, or if they're on target, I would expect about half of the data to be here and about half the data to be here. So we're going to set up our reference distributions underneath a 50-50 scenario. Now, what would happen if I had way too few females that were being over their target? Well, that would mean that they're not getting enough vitamin A. So if I have too few females over, okay, so again, if we go back up here and look at the raw data, if I have too few females that are over here, then they're not going to be getting enough vitamin A. If I have too many that are over, so let's say that all of them are over, or most of them are over, then they're going to be getting too much vitamin A. Okay, so both sides of this reference distribution are going to provide support for my research question. And again, the research question was asking, is there enough evidence to say that they're off target? So these are going to be two-tailed analyses. Too low on the number line means they have too little vitamin A. Too high in the number line means they have too much vitamin A. Now, the schematic for males is going to be very similar. The only difference is the males number line is going to go from 0 up to 14 because I only had 14 males in this study. But otherwise, everything else is the same. It's going to be set up under a 50-50 scenario. Too few males is going to be too little vitamin A intake, and too many males on the number line is going to be too much vitamin intake. 3 here is the outcome for the males. So if I just had to guess, I'm going to say that 25 is kind of within the realm here of what I would expect for females. I have 57. Half of 57 is 28 and a half, so that's where the expected is. The expected here is going to be at 28 and a half. 25 is pretty close to that. The expected here is at 7. Being 4 away, well, 4 away is not, I guess, that much. But at least on the schematic that I have shown here, 4 away looks like it's quite a bit. I guess being 4 away out of 14 is quite a bit. So I don't think my p-value is going to be very small here for the females, but it's going to be close to that 0.05 or maybe even under that 0.05 here for males. So here's just a schematic again showing you what it would look like on the right side, I guess, is what it would look like if under a situation of no difference, excuse me. So this is what it would look like for the expected, or if they were on target. And we can see that the pattern that I have observed, which is the 32-25, is not really that far from the pattern of being on target. Whereas for males, it looks like there is somewhat of a difference there between those two. A couple of definitions, and the second one is the most important one here. When we're talking about expanding the scope of inference, so if individuals are selected randomly to participate in our study from a greater population, then the scope of inference can be expanded to the group from which these individuals were selected. So let's put this in the context of the problem that we have here. If these students that participated in this study were randomly selected from WSU students, then we can make a decision about all WSU students using the data from this study. That's what we mean by expanding the scope of inference. Here, a total of 71 individuals were recruited to participate in the study. It does not explicitly say that they were randomly selected. So I don't know for sure if we can expand our scope of inference to all WSU students. If these students that participated in the study were just like WSU students, which I would anticipate they were, then maybe we can expand our scope of inference to WSU students. So when they're not randomly selected, it gets a little bit to be, there's a bit of a gray area of whether or not you're going to be able to expand your scope of inference. If you select the individuals randomly, then we can expand the scope of inference to all WSU students. But again, if we know, or if we can evaluate that they're similar, that these 71 were similar, which I would anticipate they were because they're WSU students, then some people will say that the scope of inference can be expanded to all WSU students. All right, so that's the notion of expanding our scope of inference. So let's go ahead and do our analysis for females. I went ahead and started that over here. My successes are going to be over. So they were over in their vitamin A intake. My failure is going to be under. This is a 50-50, and I had 57 total females in my study. Again, we're going to be wanting to select count here. Get a bunch here. I usually just do 5,000. Now I need to use the study outcome here. So the p-value uses the study outcome. So let's go back up and look at the study outcome. And I had, for females, a total of 25 that were over. So that's what I'm going to be using here for my p-value. 25 there. And I want to select two-tailed. We talked about that before, but both ends of my distribution are going to provide evidence for my research question. So I'm going to be selecting two-tail here. And as I anticipated, the p-value here, 0.42, is quite large. And that just means that, again, 25 is within the realm of these dots, or within the realm of our reference distribution. And our reference distribution, again, was built under the situation that females were getting an appropriate amount of vitamin A, or that they were on target. Again, you're going to want to take a screenshot of this and upload that. So I'll just do that quickly here. Oops. Throw it on the desktop. Let's call it capture is fine. If you have trouble with the drag and drop, you can also select choose file here. So if I select choose file, then I just need to go to the location of that file and grab it. So if the drag and drop doesn't work, hopefully the choose file thing works for you. Make sure and upload that to the course database. So the p-value I got here was 0.42. So when answering the questions down below, I'm going to want to be using that. So my p-value is 0.042. Yours is, 42. 0.42. Be careful with that. If you want to carry more decimals, you can, but that really doesn't matter here. So I'm going to be checking whether or not my p-value, which again, yours should be close to that, but maybe not exactly the same. Is that less than 0.05? It does not. So my conclusion here is there is not enough evidence. And then just go grab the research question. We'll make this a little, there is not enough evidence to say that WSU females are off target of their daily recommended intake of vitamin A. And the p-value for that is 0.4232, I think it was. Again, the three components of that conclusion: your decision, your research question, and then the amount of evidence that we have. So I'm going to have you go ahead and just do this same analysis for the males. Okay, so for the males is going to be set up under a 50-50 scenario again. So where's the reference distribution up here? It's going to be set up under a 50-50 scenario. You're going to go from 0 to 14, so your sample size is going to be 14 there. And your study outcome is going to be 3 here. Okay, so you're going to have to change the sample size here to 14. And then you're going to want to put 3 in here in order to get your p-value. And you're going to want to select two-tail. Get the screenshot of that and upload it, and then go ahead and answer the questions here for the males. And then I have additional questions down here about scope of inference. Again, what is the scope of inference? Well, again, if the individuals were randomly selected, I could expand my scope of inference to all WSU students. Now, I don't know if they were randomly selected. It just said that they were recruited. So I guess we're to the point of if the students in this study are similar to WSU students, what I would expect they would be, then I can talk about in general all WSU students and not just these 57 or 14 in the study. Question number 4 is just, what if I had a different p-value or a different decision? Does that influence my scope of inference? And it does not, so I'll let you answer that. And then here I have some data about calcium intake. So what we looked at was vitamin A in our analysis. But here, oops, sorry about that, I have information about calcium. So this is the calcium over-under. And you can see for calcium that males tend to be much closer to what we would expect, or they are closer to being on target. And females are the ones that do not appear to be on target here for calcium intake. So kind of the roles are reversed from vitamin A when we're looking at calcium. Okay, so make sure and answer all the questions that are here, and go ahead and submit your notes, and you should be able to go back in and see the solutions. So that does it for Module 2, Part 4, the WSU Vitamin Case Study. Thank you very much. Have a good night.